county government here everywhere we go, and we hope that other counties will follow y'all's example and be more conservative. Your commissioners had a great conversation with your commissioner a moment ago. We appreciate especially the stand that y'all's commissioners have taken for gun rights and for the pro-life cause, making it a sanctuary county to represent those areas. And we want to talk some about those issues, but we also want to tell you a lot about the GRA. Start off by just introducing ourselves to you. My wife Abby and I have been married now for about 2.5 years. That's our little baby Patience over there. We're grateful to the Lord for blessing us with this little one. Abby grew up here in West Georgia. I came from Cobb County. I was originally born in Virginia. My parents met at Liberty University when Jerry Falwell was starting all of that, and he actually officiated the wedding for my parents in 1980. That was the same year that the moral majority was working with Falwell to get Ronald Reagan elected. My parents were right in the middle of all that. And of course, my mom was from North Carolina, just Jesse Helms, North Carolina, that helped with the movement at that time. And so we got involved in politics when we moved down here to Georgia. I was invited to be a legislative aide. We homeschooled. And I was invited to be a legislative aide when I was 14 years old, 1996. That was back when governor of Georgia was, Zell Miller. Zell Miller was governor of Georgia back then. And we saw the state flip Republican in 2002 or thereabouts. And over the last 20 years, since Republicans have taken over the state legislature, we haven't seen a lot of advancement made. And that's been very bothering. And if you think about it, there's a problem in general with the GOP. And that is that over the last 40 years, even though we've won lots of elections, we haven't really seen a great stride forward in advancing our principles and our policies that are outlined in our platform. We pretty much had the same principles platform nationally anyway since 1976, the same basic principles for free markets, gun rights, pro-life, etc. But you know, even though we won half of the elections since 1940, just about, we've only we won half the elections, but if we look at the course of American history, have we really seen Republicans advancing their principles, or have we seen Democrats advancing their principles? I think, if we think about it, we've been advancing Democratic principles. Just since 1994, when we flipped the House under Newt Gingrich, the national debt was $3 trillion. What is the national debt today? 32 trillion dollars. Yeah. I would say that that's not going forward, that's going backwards. And we had 6 years where we had a Republican trifecta at the national level. We had 2 years with Donald Trump where we had a trifecta at the federal level. And we had very little bit to show for it. Yeah.
Republican trifecta being Republican control of both houses of Congress and the president.
Right, executive branch.
And in Georgia, we've had a Republican trifecta, that is, a Republican governor and a Republican majority in the state House and state Senate for what, 20 years? Most of my lifetime?
Since about 2002. So what do we have to show for all these wins? That's a big problem. And I know the establishment in Atlanta, the establishment in DC, they would say that the biggest problem is we don't win enough elections. I'm here to tell you that's not the problem we have. It's not winning elections. What good is it to win elections if we're not actually advancing what we say we stand for?
Amen.
Right? And that's really what the GRA is all about. The GRA is called the conscience of the Republican Party. The Republican assemblies were originally started back in the 1930s in California. They helped get Ronald Reagan elected as the governor of California. They helped him launch his presidential bid. And Ronald Reagan called them the conscience of the Republican Party because we actually hold Republicans accountable to what they say they believe. I know it sounds shocking. I'm sure you all have never encountered a Republican who says one thing on the campaign trail and then votes another way when he gets elected to office. Actually, to the contrary, we see that almost so often that it's not funny anymore. It's just terrible, it's deplorable, and it's to the point that people don't even believe Republicans when they say good stuff. Nobody knows when you really are a good Republican because when you say something, you could be lying through your teeth. So Republican, go ahead.
If I could interject, I'll just share a little bit of my story. So I haven't been involved in politics as long as Nathaniel has, so little disclaimer. My family didn't really start getting involved in politics until probably the Obama years. and I come from a large homeschool family. I have very wonderful, God-fearing, intentional Christian parents who are really intentional about teaching us the Word of God. And so we learned that God is over government, that God is sovereign, that government leaders are accountable to God, and that God doesn't give them just a blank check to just do whatever they want to do. Government leaders actually have delegated authority from God, but they only have some authority.
Right.
Similarly, the family and the church, they're different jurisdictions, and I think we see that very clearly taught in the Bible. Anyway, so my family believed that, but we just always thought, George Bush would get up there and say something and reference God or Christianity. We just assumed, well, that's our guy. He's trustworthy because he's a Christian.
Yeah.
And we learned that you can't actually just trust them because they throw around Christian language. That doesn't actually mean that they see government in the proper role that the Bible lays out for government. And so as we started getting involved, we did start going to our local GOP. I'm from Tunnel Hill, so we would go to the Whitfield County GOP. And you know what? It was actually a little bit disillusioning because we would see the Republican policies that Nathaniel's talking about where it's actually Democrat policies. And then we would look at the Republican platform and we'd be like, wait a second, these two contradict each other. And then if you go to a lot of local GOPs, you get there and it's all about rah, rah, rah. Aren't all Republicans wonderful?
Yeah.
And we were really turned off by that. And so we kind of turned to the Constitution Party. My dad got involved with them for a while, and they're doing a lot of good work. But I think if we had heard back then in the Obama years, what Nathaniel's going to share with y'all tonight, I think we would have been encouraged to persevere and reform the GOP. So I'm really excited about what we get to share with you all tonight, because when Nathaniel shared this vision with me, I was like, wow, you actually have a plan for how to fix it. A practical plan, not just abstract talking points, but a very practical plan. So I'm very excited to get to share that with y'all. Quick funny story. When we first met 2.5, 3 years ago, I actually wasn't really sure if he was romantically attracted to me or if he was just trying to recruit me for the GRA. That's how much he talked about the GRA, because he is that passionate about it. So really excited what we get to share with y'all tonight. The key concepts we want to look at are the mission of the GRA, the Georgia Republican Assembly, how patriot activists like you and I can get corrupted by the political industry, how to watch out for that, how to observe that, and we're also going to talk about the GOP convention cycle, which y'all have coming up on March the 4th, and some upcoming GRA events. And ultimately, how do we be involved in that process and reform the GOP as a whole?
Right. So, thank you for that, Abby. The Constitution Party is doing some great work. There's a lot of Republicans, true conservatives, that I think are getting disillusioned with the Republican Party, and they're losing a lot of great workers and grassroots people to these third parties, like the Constitution Party, the Libertarian Party, or people who are just becoming indifferent, saying, why even vote, why be involved in politics at all? And so that's one of the reasons why we exist, is to try to keep those people involved and engaged and show them, yes, it does matter. There is a difference that we can make. Don't lose them. The establishment is always worried for some reason about the moderates and the squishy people in the middle and trying to win those people. We're like, hey, no. Don't forget and lose the true conservatives in your passion to win the middle. That's why we lose elections too, not just because of the independents and so forth. But again, the conscience of the Republican Party, what that means is we actually have different mechanisms in place in our organization to hold Republicans accountable to the party platform. I think it's a great platform. Like we said, it's been pretty much the same since 1976. Its basic core principles are fantastic, and they're based on the Bible, and they're based on the values that made America great, and we're trying to get back to those. But yes.
If you've never read the Republican Party platform, you can find it at gagop.org, and you can read it. These are the 16 points up here. It might be too small for you to read tonight.
By the way,
very good, very strong.
We didn't used to have a party platform in Georgia. We had a national party. But when we first got involved, like 10 years ago, in the Georgia Republican Party, the establishment in Atlanta did not want us to have a platform. Why? Because they didn't want their elected officials at the state capitol to be held accountable to a platform. So one of the things that we successfully accomplished in the Georgia Republican Party organization is by getting enough GRA members elected to county office, like Jennifer Tudor, who's doing a great job here, and other spots, and in the state committee, and on the state executive committee. We got the chairman, David Schaefer, to agree, as a condition to us supporting him, and endorsing him, that he would allow us to pass a platform. We've got that platform passed the first year that he was the new chairman. And now we can point to that and say, look, legislators down in Atlanta, why aren't you doing these things? This platform, for example, says that life begins at fertilization, right? If life begins at fertilization, then we ought to be passing pro-life legislation that advances life being protected from the moment of fertilization, not heartbeat, not something else. We shouldn't have eugenics exceptions, etc. And that's just one tenet. You can look through that and you can see there's a lot of ways in which our legislators that call themselves Republicans don't live up to that platform. Can you go back? So there's a couple other things here. You can see this is what the trifecta looked like in Georgia prior to the last election. We lost a few seats, we gained a couple of seats here and there, but we still have a trifecta, and yet most of these legislators would not score very well. One of the things the GRA also does is we do score. This is our scoring system. You can go onto our website, GRA-PAC, and you can see how the different legislators rate, and you can see the Democrats too.
So you'll notice the rhino right here at the bottom. That is Representative Lumsden from House District 12.
Surprise.
He's down here in the F section. And you'll notice there's some R's and some D's down here in the F section. That means he got a score, this was from 2020, he got a score of 35. That means 35% of the time he votes according to the Republican Party platform,
Right.
which is a failing F.
Great.
According to our grading. So
Yeah.
this is a really great spreadsheet. You can see like which votes were good, which votes were bad, who voted yes, who voted no, and then they get scored based on that. And we're
Right.
one of the few organizations in Georgia that are actually publishing this data and actually really being honest with it. There's some organizations that will give a scorecard, but they take select votes. And of course ours aren't all the votes because there's like a lot of things that are just not consequential, right? But of the ones that are consequential, we include them.
Yeah, there's a lot of Fs on there, right?
A lot of Fs, a lot of Republicans in the Ds.
Yeah, a lot of, you can see there's some Democrats that score better than some of our Republicans. And it's one thing if that's going on in Atlanta or Metro Atlanta, but when we were in the rural districts, of Georgia, I think there's absolutely no excuse. I think a lot of these Republicans that vote like that, they are to the left of their constituency. And if we can just make the constituents aware of their voting record, we can get better people elected here in Northwest Georgia especially. So, we had some great success with that actually this last election cycle. We got two fantastic young men elected, newly elected as endorsed candidates. We got Colton Moore elected as a state senator. He's from Dade County. He did a great job when he was a state representative. He was one of the first guys to call out against the election fraud concerns when he was state rep. He's very much pro-gun. He fought for constitutional carry, and he's going to continue to be a great leader in the state Senate now that he's been elected. We got him endorsed, and we helped him to beat a county commissioner up in his neck of the woods. Very excited about that win. Also, Mitchell Horner from up in Catoosa. He's a newly elected state rep we endorsed. We've got Charlie Spurd out in Cherokee County, Jordan Ridley, and a few others we successfully endorsed. And we're going to be working closely with these guys to get some good legislation through and to put pressure on the rest of the establishment. I think it's going to be a little bit easier now that Speaker David Ralston is out of the picture. But we have to take advantage of the fact that he's gone before the establishment has a chance to reorganize themselves.
Barry Goldwater said, y'all might remember Barry Goldwater, he said, extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. Moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. Right? We're talking about babies being pulled apart, dismembered, and decapitated. Moderation in that cause is not a virtue at all.
Amen.
Right.
Because that's a justice issue. And so what is it we want? What is it we want to do and want to accomplish? We just want just and moral laws and the freedom to serve God and raise our families without government interference. Are we asking for anything extreme?
No.
Not at all. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that
So
in
that's
there.
great. Another way that the GRA is able to help serve as the conscience of the Republican Party is that unlike the GOP official, we are able to endorse in contested primaries, right? And that has served us well, like I just described in some legislative elections. But not only do we endorse in contested primaries for legislative office and commissioner and school board and things like that, but we also endorse for party leadership. And so that's been really key. We've been able to get some new party leaders elected that were endorsed in Cobb County and DeKalb County and all up and down the state. And now we have about 50% control of the Georgia GOP at the state committee level and at the executive committee level. We need to increase our margins so we have more leverage to ensure that the Georgia GOP is really living up to its principles. And that's why we really would encourage you guys, do not give up the fight. We are so close to be able to clinch this deal. I know that the opposition is very discouraging at times, especially since we spend so much time not fighting Democrats, right? We spend a lot of time fighting folks within our own party who don't actually believe what they say. But we are very close, and with these mechanisms in place, we are able to filter out, draw attention to the voting records of bad guys, and endorse the good candidates, and purge out folks in the party as well as in the legislature. So we've made great strides over the last 10 years to that effect, and I'm really excited about the potential where we can go in the legislature as well.
So I wanted to share with you all something that was really helpful to me when I learned this. Have you guys ever noticed how sometimes among our fellow activists, there will be somebody who's a fellow Christian and a patriot, and then in their activism, somehow something changes in their view, and then all of a sudden they start helping bad politicians. Mm-hmm. And they start making excuses for them. Have y'all ever observed this in your own experience? And felt somewhat betrayed even? Right? So like we're accustomed to feeling betrayed by the politicians, but sometimes when it's another activist, it's really hard. So anyway, I've come to realize that there are really two schools of thought within the GOP. One is the accountability or confrontation method, and the other I call the access method or the wine and dine method. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about those two methods. So on the accountability side, the people who would ascribe to the accountability method, it's premised on the idea that elected officials are accountable to the Constitution and to we the people. It's premised on the depravity of man, that none of us are above being tempted by greed, pride, or lust, and that anybody could be corrupted. So this school believes that elected officials work for us, we pay their salary. If they do a good job, great. If they don't, we replace them. Right? So we want our officials to do their duty before God. We encourage them to do that, and even when it's uncomfortable for us. But then if they don't, we call them out. So people in this camp cling to the Georgia GOP platform that we've talked about tonight, and they use that as a measuring rod for determining if the official is doing a good job or not. When they don't advance Republican principles and govern like rhinos, the people in the accountability camp call that out to everybody. Let everybody know in hopes that exposing them will convince enough of their fellow Republicans to vote them out and replace them. So this group believes that power is achieved by having enough people organized during the legislative session so they can leverage petitions and phone calls and emails to try to get elected officials to do the right thing. They believe people in power can be swayed by we the people, holding them accountable. And so they definitely believe in calling out bad behavior, and they don't worry about the reputation of the politician. See, that's their responsibility, we would say, and if they don't do the right thing, well then they have a bad reputation and you replace them. Simple as that. So you want his concern about losing his seat to actually motivate him to do the right thing. And like that's a benefit, that's a feature, not a defect.
Yeah.
So the people in the other camp, which I call the access-based method, or the wine and dine method, they believe success is achieved by cultivating relationships with politicians. They want to defend politicians' bad behavior in order to maintain that personal relationship. They often seek political jobs or ways to make money in the political industry. They don't want to replace incumbents, right? If you have an incumbent that you've worked really hard to wine and dine, you don't want to replace them because then you'd have to start all over with somebody new that you have to wine and dine. And also they're often willing to compromise the Georgia GOP platform in order to maintain their seat at the table. So this group would say things like, well, you know, Senator so-and-so, he's a good man. He's doing all he can down there at the Capitol. Have y'all ever heard this? Mm-hmm. That's an excuse. See, the politician makes an excuse for bad behavior, and these people, because of their relationship to the politician, they believe the excuse, and then they spread that excuse to everybody else.
Yeah, we're talking about where you hear about some legislation that's going on, that everybody's concerned about, like mental health parity. They're going to take away your rights to this mental health parity bill. And somebody says, oh no, Senator so-and-so is my friend, and he told me that bill's a good bill. So we can just check out and not even read the bill and just believe him. You know what I'm saying? You seen that kind of thing?
And
Yeah.
their whole plan, and I really don't think that they have like completely lost their mind. I think they maybe genuinely do want to advance their pro-life cause, the pro-gun cause, freedom, right? They believe a lot of stuff we do. But their plan is, by my relationship to him, eventually someday, I'll get him to do the right thing. Eventually someday we'll have a close enough relationship, he'll do the right thing. And so I dare not risk my personal relationship, hurting my personal relationship with this politician. Because someday I'm gonna need this influence, this seat at the table, this access, in order to advance our principles.
So one of the problems with that mindset is that you don't really sit in the driver's seat when you do that kind of thing. They are in the driver's seat. So if they want to remove you from having access, all they have to do is hang it over your head and say, you know what, if you say something that offends me, I'm gonna cut you off from having access to me anymore. I'm gonna cancel you. So then what does that mean? The conservatives are afraid to say anything, because then they're afraid they're gonna be excluded. They're not gonna have a seat at the table anymore. Did you have a question
I
or
was
a
just going
comment?
to ask, is that the same mindset that they use when they're worried about not being appointed to certain chairmanships?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Right on.
All kinds of guards thinking that they'll be blah, 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 chairman or
Right.
part of that committee or whatever.
Yeah.
right, so the representatives down there representing us, the
That's one
legislature,
of the first thing the elections told us, we've got to go along to get along, you know?
Right.
And we've all, everybody here just found a lot on it, but it didn't matter. He went ahead and did what he wanted to do.
So it works the same way at the Capitol. The legislator that we send from Somerville down to the Capitol, he wants to have access to the Speaker of the House, and to the governor, and the bigwigs, right? And he also wants to have access to the Georgia GOP chairman, right? And the bigwigs within the GOP. And so the problem is in the party, among the activists, it's also at the Capitol, and it's also like within the Capitol employees themselves. Who has access, who can wine and dine the powerful people the most and develop that relationship. And the problem is it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you can have all the access to Governor Kemp you want, but if you get to a point where you're so scared to use your relationship to actually get him to do the right thing, what good is the seat at the table if you can never use your influence to do the right thing?
Right.
And so it's interesting that politicians keep making the excuses, the access-based activists keep believing them, keep spreading the excuses, and shielding the rhinos from any accountability. So then along comes the other guy, the accountability activist, that we would ascribe to that method, and we're like, hey, Mr. So-and-so's a bad guy, and they're like, all totally defending him. And so we end up like fighting within the party. And actually, it's not such a terrible thing that we're fighting within the party, because if we would have unity by just all of us joining their side, the wine and dine access method, well, then we would just have Democrat policies all the time. So actually, division is preferable to unity. If to achieve unity, you have to totally give up all the principles, give up what we know to be actually true.
Yeah, I like what one guy said, one of our conservative friends said, if you establishment folks, we could have unity if you would just agree with us. And I was like, yeah, just concede you're wrong and we're right. But no, this is such a big thing that it's not just happening at an individual level. There are now whole organizations that exist and operate at the state capitol that operate this way. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice that there are faux or pseudo gun rights groups. There are pseudo pro-life groups. You literally can go down the entire Republican Party platform, and there's an organization that stands for some tenet of the party, like free market capitalism or whatever. And they have developed their own little brand and following, and they'll tell you about how they have access to the governor and the speaker, and they'll have their legislative luncheon where they have all these legislators come, and it's all about access, access, access. Look who we're friends with, who we're in cahoots with. But if you look at what they're pushing, what they're promoting, they're not actually coming to the governor or the speaker and saying, here's the agenda we would like for you to pass to advance the Republican principles. What they're doing is they're waiting for the speaker or the governor to come to them and say, here's what I want to advance. Now you guys whitewash it, you go out to the masses and you tell them that it's a great bill, tell them to go back to sleep and just say, I'm doing a good job, and promote it, support it. And that's what we've seen time and time again. These organizations will do great PR for these Republican establishment rhinos and make it sound like this is a very pro-life bill or a very pro-gun bill or small government bill. Yeah. I'm not talking about, like Georgia Gun Owners. Georgia Gun Owners is a really good one, but there are, right. You'll know what I'm talking about. Literally, every issue has one of those it's what they call the controlled opposition. You ever heard the concept of controlled opposition?
Absolutely.
You get some group that, supposedly is opposition, but they're really just serving the enemy. And that's what's going on.
And they're well-meaning people. I
Some-
really think there's a lot of well-meaning people who just got this idea in their head, like this is how we do it, this is our plan, and so they've just fallen for a plan that frankly doesn't work and contributes to the problem.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't want to necessarily come out and start calling names, but I was disappointed last year by the Faith and Freedom Coalition, even. When they posted a legislator's scorecard and they put Representative Sharon Cooper as like an A. And I was like, not according to our scorecards,
Yeah, no. See, obviously, Sharon Cooper, by anybody who's been paying attention, Sharon Cooper is not pro-life, she's not small government, she's not free market, she's not pro-gun. She literally, on every single measurement, she is a moderate at best. So to give her an A, especially when we had a real conservative that was running against her in the Republican primary, is so laughable to anybody who's paying attention that it's just, obviously you're just kowtowing because you're trying to have influence with that chair of that committee.
So it turns into a big PR battle, right? One group says they're great, the other group says they're terrible, and then we're all competing to try to get the masses to listen and to pay attention. So anyway, the conclusion here is that if we have to work really, really hard to protect the reputation of a legislator or somebody in the Georgia GOP, then what we've got is we've got the tail wagging the dog.
Right.
Right? They're responsible for their own reputation. If they're doing good work, then we shouldn't have to make them look wonderful. They ought to be wonderful all on their own. If they're really doing good stuff, you'll see it.
But you'll see, yes, the GRA, if they do something good, we'll praise them. Like when Governor Kemp signed the constitutional carry bill, we were up there praising him for doing that. But we are also quite willing to call out Governor Kemp if he does something bad. And we got to be able to do both. We need to be willing to do both.
One other element here, just in the access-based mindset, if you've got like young people, like in my generation, oftentimes if they're looking for a political job, which of these two methods do you think they're going to employ? They're going to employ the second one, the wine and dine method, because if you want a political job, well then you have to work for somebody in the political industry who has money. And who in the political industry has lots of money? The rhinos, of course. The people in power. And so there's going to be a natural incentive if you're trying to get a political job to try to defend them, get on their good side, get their good graces. And so that's what happens to a lot of young Republicans, and why this message is really important, I think, for the younger generation who's starting to get involved in politics, because it's easy for them to be sucked in to thinking this is how you succeed, is by getting in the good graces of the powerful. So just wanted to throw that in there. We see this sometimes in the church as well. So pastors will sometimes feel this pressure, like I have a platform, but if I use the platform to say something controversial, my congregants might kick me out. And so like anybody in an authority leadership position is going to feel that pressure and that tension. So that's why it's really important to encourage them to do the right thing. And as we start talking about the GOP convention cycle, this is what I want you to look for. On March the 4th, when you all meet here and you're having your precinct meeting and you're electing people, you want to elect people. This is the goal. The plan is to get more of the accountability group. More of these people, the accountability confrontational activists, in leadership positions in the GOP. So then the GOP structure is then used as a vehicle to hold elected officials accountable.
Right.
Because it's a great structure. They already have a lot of people and they're already paying attention. But the problem is that they end up being the access, wine and dine kind of activists. And those are the people, part of the political industry, who tend to be involved in politics. Why? Well, because they're looking for political jobs and they're making money. So of course I'll volunteer and be the chair of the county, because they're also looking to get a job with somebody and make money out of it.
Right. You're gonna see Governor Kemp run a candidate for state chair that will basically be a yes man to him. You know, it's going to happen. It happened last time. Governors always do it. They don't always succeed. They haven't the last few times. But you're going to see them run a candidate that will be a yes man and just try to make you look good. I think at this point we have enough activists who are paying attention that I don't think that's going to fly, especially if we all stay engaged. But we need to get good people like Jennifer Tudor reelected. We need to get, you've got some great people here in the 14th district. I just got redistricted into the 14th. I was in the 11th, and now I get to work with great people like Jennifer. We've got Joanna Hildreth up in Catoosa, who's also on the 14th district committee. We've got our chairwoman, Denise Burns, who's an excellent activist with the GRA, also GRA member and officer. And so we need to capitalize on the good people we have here. Get more of you good people elected to leadership positions in your county, in your district, and on the state committee. Folks, there's like 150 state committee positions. We have about half of those. If we can just get a few more people elected to the state committee, we could have avoided some really ridiculous controversies. I don't know if y'all heard, but last convention cycle, Fulton County pulled the establishment rhinos down in Fulton County, basically stole the election from the Fulton County. We had a great woman, Susan Oversuit, who should have won the chair position in Fulton County. And they took that whole trial. They were trying to count back, the votes with what's the sticks? Tiddlywink sticks. And they miscounted, and somebody pointed out that it was a miscount. Susan would have won. They took the whole ordeal to the state committee. Do you know we lost that appeal by 3 votes on the state committee? 3 votes. You could have gotten somebody who's a real, conservative, strong, America First type Republican running the Fulton County GOP, who would have actually be taking the Democrats to task when we have these just horrendous examples of election fraud going on in downtown Fulton County. Instead, we've got, the same establishment hacks that have been running the Fulton County GOP for the last 15 years still in power because we came short 3 votes on the state committee. So it is very important for us to get more true conservatives running the GOP. That's how close we are.
And if you're like me, you probably go to some of these meetings and you actually feel a little bit disgusted. Or like Jennifer says, angry. Or you just sit there and it's like, why do I have to listen to bad politicians who I know have terrible voting records? Why do they get to give speeches and I have to sit here and listen? Here I've taken off time for my family and work, and why am I sitting here? And then it's dirty and there's like a lot of infighting and stuff. A friend of ours said his philosophy is this. After the 2020 election, he's young, in his 30s, he has like 2 little kids. He said, my wife and I, we just decided we have to be involved in politics just like you take out the trash. If you don't like it, it's not fun, it's dirty, but it's the responsible adult thing to do. And if we're going to save this country, being involved in politics is just the responsible adult thing to do. You just have to make time for it. It's not because you particularly enjoy the drama of politics and the political life. You don't enjoy the controversy. It's not necessarily a hobby. Now, some people maybe are just naturally drawn toward it and it's a hobby for them, and that's great. But if you're like me, you maybe get really turned off and it's kind of dirty and you really don't even want to go.
Right.
But if you can suffer through it and just be like, look, I'm here because I'm going to bring accountability. I am not going to let the incompetence or the wicked people or the untrustworthy people with no integrity, I'm not going to let them run the GOP organization. I'm going to actually step up and be the responsible person in my community. And I think that's the mindset that's really helped encourage me a lot in the last year, ever since I heard our friend Chris say that. And just be like, yeah, I don't like it, but it's like taking out the trash.
Right. Price of liberty is eternal vigilance. And
Amen.
One of the things you'll hear at the GRA a lot, we quote the famous Edmund Burke quote you probably heard before, that all that it takes for evil to succeed is for good people to do nothing. And I realize that, you get worn down, right? We're not getting paid like a lot of these establishment people are. We don't have political jobs. We're working normal jobs. We have families with children, and we're trying to just do the normal American life. These politicians and these establishment people who get paid to be in Atlanta, it's no big deal for them to be involved in this convention season. They can count all of this as an expense, a tax-deductible expense, right? If you're a lobbyist and you participate in the Cobb GOP or the Georgia GOP, the entry fee, everything, it's all tax deductible. Your mileage down to the state convention is tax deductible, right? Not for us, right? It's real sacrifice. But if we don't, if we get out, if we surrender, we give up, we quit, then the bad guys win by default. So we cannot quit. Now, if you can recruit somebody to replace you, mentor somebody, great. But don't just give up and let the bad guys take over again. We spent way too much time building up our momentum to allow that to happen.
R.J. Rushdoony said, history has never been dominated by majorities, but by highly dedicated minorities who stand unconditionally on their faith.
Very true. You see that in history over and over again.
You know, I think of, I'm no expert on the early Marxist history. I know some people do a lot of research on that. But from what I've gathered, you got like the Fabians, you got the Frankfurt School, and the early cultural Marxists that said, hey, instead of doing a violent revolution for communism, what if we infiltrate the culture? Let's infiltrate the churches and the seminaries and academia and the media and journalism. And we'll just push all our ideas out on the culture. Those guys, back in the early 1900s, it amazes me that they, with their atheistic Marxist worldview, nevertheless were willing to not see success in their generation. They were okay with adopting a plan with 100-year endpoint, 100-year goal.
That's correct.
And it amazes me, because here we are, we're Christians, right? We believe that we're going to win in the end. We believe in that we have eternal life. And somehow they, the worldly people, are in some ways wiser than the children of light, in that they think 100 years in advance. And so I've been really challenged recently to think about the generation my daughter's going to grow up in, and be okay, and really encouraging myself, like, I should be okay with not seeing results in the next 10 years, or the next 50 years, or in my lifetime, if it means that what I'm doing actually is going to contribute to the America my daughter's going to grow up in. And I think that's a mindset we really need to have. And it seems like, man, we're not making any progress. But Nathaniel can tell you, since he's been involved a lot longer than I have, we have actually made huge progress. The Georgia GOP chairman, correct me if I'm wrong, used to be a bought and paid for lobbyist in the political industry.
Not the current one, but one of the former ones, the previous, John Watson was his name. He was a lobbyist. He's one of the biggest lobbyists pushing for gambling here in Georgia, pushed for a lot of other stuff. You can thank him for those cameras at the intersections that give you tickets. He was involved in that, a lot of other stuff. Watson was the former chairman of the Georgia GOP, and before him you had John Padgett. These two guys presided over a situation in which the party was put over $250,000 in debt. We were over $300,000 in debt, and we at the GRA criticized the bad spending habits of their chairman and many other problems. We got a new chairman in who paid off the debt, gave us a party platform, gave the Republican Assembly a seat at the table to influence the future. And so we have made strides. I'm not saying that we're happy and satisfied, and not saying we're ready to, rest on our laurels. We have so much more to go. But we have had great success. It's because people like y'all have been with us in the fight now for 10 years or more. We're excited about that. So
it's going to take getting good people elected to run your county GOP and your district and the state level, which all starts with that precinct meeting where you become a delegate and you get to vote for them.
But
and so,
has anybody here not been through that process before? Raise your hand if you've never been through the convention process before. Okay, we got a few that are new. Awesome, that's great. So March the 4th, y'all said, is when it all starts. That's when you elect your delegates to county, and then you elect your officers to county. I hope that you'll re-elect Jennifer if you can't find somebody else that's as awesome as she is to fill in the gap. but don't let any rhinos into your county GOP, please, please, please. Very important for all of y'all to be there for that. Not only do you do that at that meeting, you also will elect delegates to go to the 14th District Convention, right? So, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene is the 14th Congressional Representative here in this area. We are now part of the 14th because our Cobb County maps got redone, so we get to be a part of that district convention with you guys. That's going to be exciting. We can't wait to be there because I'll tell you, the 14th district is so much more conservative than the 11th district. I am so much looking forward to being with you guys, and so tired of being with some of those folks in Fulton County who are just
Amen.
totally establishment folks. Anyway, I'm going to be running for state committee again. I've been on the state committee for the last few years. I'm going to be running for state committee. I hope, I think the rule in the 14th district is that the county chairs get to be on the state committee. Are you on the state committee right now? No? The default is if you want to be, you can be, I think, if you're the county chair. So Jennifer could be on the state committee, but we should be electing state committee officers from every county, and you want to make sure they're true conservatives. Because again, the state committee, we don't have a lot of meetings, but usually when we do meet, we're voting on some pretty critical issues. And we need to have a really strong state committee, and we need to have really strong executive officers with the Georgia GOP. We'll be meeting to select delegates to the 14th district on March the 4th, or y'all will be. You'll also be electing delegates to go to the state convention in June, which will be in Columbus. And at the state convention in June, you don't have to do both of those, you can do one or the other. I know Columbus is far away, so if you can only be here for the district convention, that'd be great. But at the state convention, that's where we're going to be electing executive officers, state party chair. By the way, you guys know, state party chair, national committee man, national committee woman, they're going to be voting on who our new RNC chair is. And I know a lot of people are upset with the RNC chair because of how the last election cycle went. Those 3 representatives for our state get to vote to decide who might replace her. So that's an important thing. Not only that, but that's going to set the stage for next year when we have presidential delegates to elect to go to national and so forth.
So,
a lot at stake.
I don't know about y'all, but up until a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I didn't even know this process existed.
Me neither. I actually worked at the state capitol for 8 years for 8 different Republicans in the state legislature, and I had no idea there was this whole convention system. So, but it has a huge impact.
Yeah, and the establishment doesn't want a bunch of new accountability-minded people coming in. Like, they're okay if it's just the good old boys club who continue running the GOP.
Right.
So that's why it's really important that you guys come in, and if you don't know how, if you have questions about that process, you can ask Nathaniel, because the GRA, Alex Johnson, the president of the organization, has held trainings. So he'll come into a county like this one ahead of the convention season, and he's, I think, doing 1 or 2 in a couple different counties over the next month or 2, and he's going to be training activists like you all so that you know how it works, know how the process goes.
Understand parliamentary procedure.
Understand
If you're not
parliamentary
familiar with
stuff.
that.
Yeah, and so he could do that here for you guys if he wanted to. Question?
I agree with all you're saying, but what I'm concerned about is, you see this is a good group here, but still, our numbers have gone down and down to our meetings in the last 4, 5, 6 months. And a lot of it has to do with the frustration the conservative Republicans here have with what's going on at the polls,
Right.
what's going on in Washington.
Right.
And they don't think their vote counts anymore.
Right.
And they think that our party is not doing anything because we've had people at times that haven't been doing anything and been doing the wrong things, even in our
Right.
local party. So I'm not sure how many people we'll see at the district convention, and
Right.
I don't know how to get the good people here.
Mm-hmm.
I hear you. Now, there's some good reasons why folks are getting discouraged. I mean, wouldn't say they're, valid, but I can understand why they're discouraged, especially, after we've seen the election fraud concerns and the Republicans in the legislature basically just, they moved chairs around on the Titanic essentially with that last election reform bill that didn't really effectively do anything.
Going on in Washington, and what the news is portraying it, and these people are watching the national regular news, even the conservative ones are not looking at it very good. They're basically going against those 20 people who are standing up for the true conservative values.
Amen.
And they're against them saying they're holding out, and so it's making people upset here. So when the convention comes along, I'm afraid we're not gonna see many people even go.
Yeah, well, I think I really appreciate that, Mr. Avenue. I think one of the things you could do is just kind of plead with them, make the case that if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. And tell them that it's just so much more encouraging to gather together and actually meet with other activists who recognize the problem and want to and are trying to do something about it. Like, I used to be one of those people, Mr. Avenue. We'd stay home, we'd watch what was going on, read the papers, and just be upset. And we just didn't really see the path, and I think that's the real key. They have to capture the vision, see the vision for how to get there. Maybe we don't get there in 1 year or even 2 years, but in 10 years. Let them see how their involvement actually will lead to change. And so I think you can do that, but we definitely need to work on that messaging. And I'm thinking about some friends of mine. There's a lot of Christian friends that I have in my phone that if we all came and we all got involved in the party, we could literally run the party. Especially you get a few Christian homeschool families with like 10 kids,
Yeah.
They're done it.
So yeah, have more children, right? We need to take back there's so many important things we got to take back. Education is a critical battle point right now that I think most Americans are starting to wake up to. The wokeism, the more that we just yield to the left, and here's my beef. Like I said at the beginning, we've been surrendering. We've been winning all these elections these last 40 years. We have very little to show for it. Republicans get into office and they're just about maintaining the status quo, which is Latin for the mess that we're in, right? That's basically what we try to do. Don't rock the boat. We don't want to lose the election, lose our power. Democrats get into office, especially if they have a Democrat trifecta. They're like, oh boy, how much trouble can we cause in 2 years before the next election cycle? We're going for broke, right? We saw them do that this last 2 years. We saw them do it back when Obama first got elected with Obamacare. Every time they get, they go for broke and they push as much of their agenda through as they possibly can. They don't care if they lose the next election. Republicans got to have that kind of mission mind. And if we don't, we're going to end up like communist Soviet Russia. I heard a funny joke earlier about Soviet Russia back in the day when Joseph Stalin was running a potato farmer, came to Stalin and he said, "Oh, Comrade Stalin, the potatoes in my farm, there's so many that they stack up into the sky, all the way to the heavens, all the way to the face of God." And Comrade Stalin said, "We don't believe in God, there is no God." He said, "Exactly, and there are no potatoes." That's what you get when you believe in the premises of Marxism and socialism and statism. They don't work. Not only are they false, not only are they bankrupt morally, theologically, but they just don't work because God created this world. If you follow God's ways, they work. The reason why I think the statists are so passionate about advancing their belief system is because it is their religion. It literally is their religion. If you read the Second Humanist Manifesto, it says, point blank, there is no God, therefore we must save ourselves. We are our own saviors. And then they delineate, well, how do we plan on being our own saviors? Oh, well, we're going to implement socialism and statism and one world government, and we're going to force homosexuality and get rid of the nuclear family and yada, yada, yada. It's basically the Democratic platform. That is what they believe will bring salvation to this world. And it's because they are total materialists who deny God. That's their ultimate premise, right? Christians, conservatives, we need to be as passionate and as dedicated to our cause as they are, but having different premises. We realize, look, we're not involved in politics because we believe everything is about politics. Politics is not the solution. It's not salvation. You're not going to save people, through social engineering and big government mechanisms of manipulation on people. That's not what we believe. We're just trying to be involved in government to keep the bad guys out, to keep people like that who think that way out, so that God can do his work of grace through churches, through families, through private businesses. We're not trying to put everything into this one great big Babylonian, Tower of Babel. Everything has to be under the state. God designed the social order to include churches, families, businesses, and when you have that distribution of freedom, that's when we really see things prosper. And that's what I think the Republican Party supports and has supported historically.
And that's why we appreciate Freedom of Commerce organization Charles Stoker is working with.
Yeah.
That is a conservative alternative to the Chamber of Commerce. And we definitely need more Christians stepping up, taking leadership roles. So, anyway, to probably wrap it up here.
Yeah.
If you want to join the Georgia Republican Assembly, just go to georgiara.com, or you can also check out the legislative scorecards, check out on your legislators at the state level. That's a
We
great
have
place to
those
do
put
that.
out. And if you become a member of the Georgia Republican Assembly, that will entitle you to vote for endorsements at our endorsement conventions when we're voting on who to, endorse for party office or for legislative office or county commissioner or board commissioner or whatever race it is. By the way, there's an excellent chapter here in Northwest Georgia, led by Eddie Caldwell. I don't know if y'all know Eddie Caldwell and Joanna Hildreth. They're looking to expand their chapter to include y'all's county if y'all are interested in being a part of that. And then you guys can be a part of organizing those endorsement conventions here in the 14th District. Yes, sir. Charles, sir.
We don't want to be a part of theirs. We need 5 more members to do our own.
Okay. Well, that's not a bad idea either. Yeah, you have to have a minimum of 10 members to start your own chapter. If you want to do that, that's good too. But we want to build more chapters. But then you can be a part of the endorsements if you are a member.
And if you sign up tonight, that should give you time to get processed, assuming you're vetted and you make it, which I'm sure all of you would be approved as members. But once you become a member, then you'll be able to vote because we will be having an endorsement convention soon for the party office. So like
Right.
Georgia GOP state party chair, vice chair, all those other offices. And you'll be able to help determine and help point out, this is the true patriot, those are the rhinos. And
Okay.
so we would love to have you participate in that process. It's $45 for an individual annually to have an annual membership, and I think $80 for a couple, so you get a small savings there for $85.
Right. We also are going to have a president's dinner. We had a great keynote from Thomas Massey. Congressman Thomas Massey was our last keynote of our last president's dinner. He's the only Republican that's actually on record voting against the CARES Act that started the inflationary spiral that we're in today. And we had a great talk with him last time. We want to have some other great speakers come and share with you. But we try to bring true heroes, people that are standing for our principles. We'll have our endorsement convention in late April, early May, most likely. And y'all have an opportunity to be part of that. We have another event that we're sponsoring coming up in early next month, the Faith and Medicine Conference. That is an excellent event. I know a lot of people have been concerned about things like vaccine mandates and church lockdowns, and there's been a lot of medical issues that relate to politics and theology that have kind of gotten all muddled together in the last couple of years. The Faith and Medicine Conference is not strictly a political event. It's primarily focused on holistic medicine from a Christian perspective. They deal with subjects like, if you have cancer, how can you cure cancer in a healthier way without having to do chemotherapy? They talk about lots of different things, but this particular event, where our panel is going to be dealing with some of these big controversial subjects like vaccine mandates. Now we're also getting into some of these brave new world concepts like, what about trans? Trans is on the rise. The left is really pushing the trans ideology, not just on adults, but on children, right under our noses in our school system, and drag queens in our libraries. Did y'all hear about Kirk Cameron and his big victory recently? Wasn't that exciting?
Very.
But it astounds me how many people, even here in rural Georgia, have capitulated to this onslaught. We've got to take a stand against these things, and these panels are going to be talking about those issues and many others. If you haven't seen the documentary from Matt Walsh with Daily Wire,
What is a Woman?
What is a Woman? That's a great documentary on that subject. It's a very mature film, not rated G, but it's just truthful about the problem all across the nation. And in fact, Daily Wire, those guys, if you want an alternative source to some of the guys like Sean Hannity, the guys on Daily Wire, they have been very supportive of the 20 that have been pushing the last couple of days against Speaker Kevin McCarthy. They offer a more conservative perspective that might be an encouragement for the folks who said they're getting discouraged. The guys at Daily Wire and some of the others, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, and some of the others on there have been really supportive.
If I could just wrap it up with one quote from Doug Wilson, Pastor Doug Wilson. He said, you don't fight a tank war without tanks. You don't fight a naval war without ships. And you don't fight a culture war without a culture.
Culture.
And so we're all about building culture, building it from the grassroots up, building it at the family level, building it at the business level with freedom of commerce, building it at the medicine level. People who are involved in medicine, they need to have a Christian culture of Christian doctors who are coming together and encouraging one another and talking about how that relates to the Christian worldview, as opposed to the CDC and the AMA and all those big woke organizations. We gotta have our own conservative organizations building culture. And so that is my admonition, and that's something all of us can do at the family level, right? We're gonna fight the culture war by birthing children and changing their diapers and raising them up to fear God, not the state, to worship God, not the state. Raising them, raising our family, developing culture in our churches that is gonna counter all the wokeism and all the wokies out there.
Amen.
Roy?
I just had I was wondering if you, from the GRA perspective, would comment on this recent talk about changing the election procedures, like the choice rank voting, and the lobbyists that are actively trying to, you're obviously closer than we are. What is going on with this?
So you might have seen our email. We sent out an email. If you're on our email list, we sent out an email on this recently. We were surprised that Secretary of State Raffensperger came out saying, the legislature needs to go back to the drawing board, because that's what we've been saying. But his view of what they should do when they go back to the drawing board is very different from ours. He was saying, ranked choice voting and some other procedures that we think are terrible ideas. If you look at how ranked choice voting has played out across the country, typically it helps liberals. I mean, you can see where it's been implemented. California, Hawaii, New York, these are some of the most liberal states in the country. And there is a problem with our elections that does need to be fixed. This is not the solution. One thing that we've encouraged them to do is get rid of all these drop boxes. That's one of the ways that the ballot harvesting is a huge problem. Narrow the window to when people can vote. It used to be called election day, because people voted on election day. Now it's like election month. And people can come in and cast votes for other people and say, well, I'm picking this up for my mother or my grandmother. Well, you ought to only cast a vote for yourself, and you ought to show your photo ID to prove that it's you and that you're of a sound mind, that you're not a nurse from a nursing home that got somebody to scribble their name onto the bottom of that ballot who's half comatose. Right. I mean, there's so many ways that this system can be exploited, and of course the Dominion voting system. There's so many problems, potential problems. Even if they want to keep it, and I don't think they should, but if they want to keep Dominion, they ought to get rid of some of the features. We're one of the only states that uses all of the features that Dominion offers, including those QR code looking things on the ballots. Get rid of all that. And if we can go back to paper ballots, then that would be wonderful. But we need to make sure that we're not opening the door to so many vulnerabilities, so many potential mechanisms for cheating.
Yeah, the irony there is that the Secretary of State's office sounds like they're trying to simplify it, right? By going to ranked choice voting so that you don't have a runoff that you have to come to later. But if you're gonna simplify it, believe me, Jennifer Tudor can tell you a lot of ways to simplify it, because multiple ways to vote means multiple ways to cheat. So we're all about simplifying it. Why don't you take it back to paper ballots?
Yeah.
Right? Simplifying it is a good idea, but probably not that way, because that would probably, ranked choice voting would probably further the problem of low information voters showing up just voting for whatever name they heard the most on TV, and they know nothing about the candidate. And well, if the Republican doesn't win, I guess I could pick the Democrat, and So I think that would just really, really make the problem worse by allowing low information voters more opportunities to pick really horrible candidates.
Gotcha.
You're going to see, I think in the coming legislative session, you're going to see some key battles. We're going to see a battle on this subject. We're going to see our endorsed legislative candidates try to fight for legislation to revise the election system the way we're describing.
Okay.
We're going to see a big pro-life battle. There's a coalition of different conservative groups that are going to be pushing for equal protection for the preborn. So no abortion allowed from the moment of conception, just like the Republican platform states. You're going to see that pushed. We're also on the defensive side going to probably be fighting Republicans in the establishment that want to continue to advance this concept of mental health parity. David Ralston's baby from last year, his wife is running to replace him in the state legislature. She says, there's so much more work to do on mental health parity. that is potentially a Pandora's box opening up the door for a lot of our rights to be taken away. Because again, if you have a statist mindset, you don't believe the Bible, then you don't believe man's basic problem is sin. You're going to say it's some
Right.
psychological stuff with mental health parity. Well, that can lead to people saying, well, if we don't think you have right mental health parity, we can take away your gun rights, or we can take away your right to vote, or any number of rights, just because you disagree with us. And effectively, the cancel culture could be used to take away your rights to participate in society as a citizen.
Mental health is determined by social norms, right? What is a normal, healthy, mentally healthy person is determined by social norms. And who determines social norms,
Exactly.
right? Is it the wokies, right? Are we the crazy ones? I don't think
They
so.
think.
I think everybody in Atlanta's crazy.
Right. So to
Amen.
wrap it up, you know, like my wife said, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. So let's not give up the fight. We are here with you to support you, and we are going to continue this fight so that we continue to have liberty in America and in Georgia. Do you have a question or comment?
I would just, again, we're talking about the voting situation, and
Yeah.
it's a shame that we have the House, the Senate, and the governor, and we can't change the ballot system. That's just
Right.
ridiculous.
What's the point of getting Republicans elected if they're going to do that?
Probably not Republicans, that's worse than rhinos.
Sure.
Right.
And they passed 2 years ago an election bill that supposedly fixed everything, and now they're wanting to change it to ranked choice voting. I mean,
And yet, when we have this
ridiculous.
convention coming up, people are gonna say, well, why go to the Republican Party? Look what they're doing down there.
Oh, I know, yeah.
You know, and so it's hard to get a consensus of good people to come out and be part of it.
Right. Yeah. Don't let, you know, them do to your county what they did to us in Cobb County. I was telling your commissioner before we started that we had a very conservative county. When I was growing up, Cobb was known as being, you know, very conservative all across the state. But our Republican county commissioners voted for certain development projects like that Brave Stadium deal where we subsidized a billionaire's stadium to the tune of $400 million taxpayer dollars and a bunch of apartment complexes around that, and then a bunch of apartment complexes around KSU. And all those apartment complexes were filled with Democrats by and large. And then we scratched our head and wondered why Cobb County turned purple. Well, it wasn't done because the Republican chairman dropped the ball on a particular election. It was done 5 years before when the county commissioners voted for policies that changed the demographics of our county. And again, if our Republicans in the Cobb GOP had been on top of their game and called out the commissioners at that time, it might not have happened. But we had GOP Cobb leadership back then who was bought and paid for by the establishment, Joe Dendy, who's now sitting in prison for child molestation. That chairman, in my mind, is very much responsible for turning a deaf ear and not speaking out when the commissioners were doing what they were doing. Yeah.
How much does it cost to join the GRA, and how much does it cost to join the Freedom of Commerce?
You know more about the freedom of commerce than I do, Mr. Stoker. You can tell us that. Like Abby said, we have individual memberships for what, $45? Family memberships for $80. So you save some money if you do the family deal. We'd love to have you guys, like-minded patriots, join us in this cause, and we look forward to seeing you on the convention trail. Thank you so much for having us, Jennifer. Appreciate you. So please, convince this lady to either stay in office or find an Elijah, her Elijah, that can be just as good as her. Yeah.